Welcome back, writers. I am very excited because today we have the lovely Mara Rutherford with us, who is the incredible young adult author of Coral and Pearl and Luminous, which I actually just recently finished and I love. I'm even more excited because you're joining us all the way from Serbia. So thank you very much for being here with us today, Mara.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And so you've got, I hope I'm allowed to say this. So you got another book coming out at the end of this year as well.
Yes.
Are you able to give us a little bit of a teaser of what that's about?
Yeah, sure. The cover's up and the blurb is up, so I can talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Poison Season will be out December 6th. It's another standalone fantasy like Luminous, and it's about a girl who lives on an isolated island surrounded by a poisonous lake, and she has sort of this singing magic, and it's kind of like Sirens, but it's more of a sort of Northern European folktale take on it. And so, yeah, she accidentally lures someone to the lake, and then you have to read to find out.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. I love the way you write too. You're definitely a writer. You know you're going to pick up the next book and absolutely love it. Everything is just, it's got this point of magic to it, and I'm I'm a huge fan. So how did you start off in your writing journey? Where did it start from you, and how did you, why do you write the specific way that you do?
So, I mean, I've always loved books and writing and reading. When I was a little girl, I'm a triplet. I have an identical sister and a brother.
Wow.
But my sister, Sarah, and we had a best friend named Erin, a girl Erin. My brother is also Erin, so it gets confusing. And she loved to read and loved fantasy and loved to write. And she wrote, an entire novel when we were in 6th grade. And so she was very inspiring to me. It was like, oh, kids can write books. So we would write books together. And I loved writing, but I never thought about writing as a career, certainly not writing fiction. I was an anthropology major in college. I wanted to go into like book reviews, movie reviews, journalism type stuff. I did that for a little while. I found it boring. Straight news reporting I found boring. And then I found myself without a job, living in South Texas with my fiance at the time, now husband. And I was like, well, I have literally nothing else to do. I guess I'll try writing a book. And so I did, and it was terrible, but I loved the process. And that was kind of what made me think like, oh, I could write fiction, not necessarily for money, but that would obviously be a dream. So then I started just trying to learn more about publishing. I worked in like book distribution for large, like Costco, big club stores.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of free books. I got to read a ton. I got to meet authors and just sort of learn about how publishing worked. And then I worked for a literary agent for about 1.5 years for free, just to learn as much as I could. And all this time I'd been writing novels, not that well, but learning as I went, going to writers' conferences and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until 2011 that I started writing fantasy, or young adult and then fantasy. So it was this all started in 2004. So it was a long process. And and then I didn't write like a full-on fantasy book until I wrote Crown of Coral and Pearl. I was doing like, a parallel world fantasy or a urban fantasy, but I didn't think that I could write, like, make up my own world. And I got the idea for Crown of Coral and Pearl, and here we are.
That's amazing. Yeah, so that's an awesome story. Firstly, I love how you've got into distribution and then working for the literary agent and just the full process. So this is a beautiful journey of how Coral and Pearl came to be. When you said that you first didn't think that you could write fantasy and make up your own world, is that actually what you've always wanted to do? It was kind of just
I mean, I think so, because that's what I had read for most of my life. I mean, I was reading, the Wheel of Time books when they first came out when I was, I think, 12 maybe.
Yeah.
So I've been reading fantasy and, and Tolkien and, Chronicles of Narnia and all that stuff since I was little. And it's always what I've loved reading. But yeah, I think I've always kind of had that doubt about myself. The same thing with art. Like my sister is really creative as an artist, and I've always been felt like I was competent, like I could copy someone else's drawing, but I didn't have the imagination to create my own. So I think it was kind of like, it took me a long time to get to a point where I believed in myself enough to do it.
Yeah.
And even then, I'd had a book that hadn't sold at that point, so I really didn't necessarily have the reason to think that I could do it. But then once I did it, I was kind of hooked on it. So.
Yeah. And how did you know that Coral and Pearl was the one? Had you tried to publish other works of yours before that? And...
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I've been trying to get an agent for a long time at that point. It took me 10 years to get my first agent. And then that book didn't sell. It went on submission and got some nibbles, but didn't sell. Then broke up with that agent, which was really difficult. And I'd already written Coral and Pearl at that point. So I queried again. That was like the next book that I tried to get an agent for. And I ended up having a lot of interest in getting 3 offers from agents. So that was definitely validation that I needed at that. Yeah. But I didn't know it would sell. I mean, it was on submission for 9 months. So I was pretty sure it wasn't going to sell at that point. And I'd already written Luminous, and I'd already written another book, which will be my 5th book. So those ended up selling much later. So I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, I want to come back to that 10-year process, but just since you've brought it up, I think this is another really great topic to go into. It's you've already written, like, from when you wrote Luminous or you wrote Coral and Pearl, compared to when they actually get published. What is the year, like, how is the distance of years between that for you? And how do you go when you're writing a piece and then, a book so many years ago comes out, and how do you go with that process? Are you patient? Like,
no, I'm not. I think a lot of writers will say, oh, I'm so impatient. I know I just need to give it time. And I'm always like, no, you're not impatient. This industry is just maddening because everything takes forever. Yeah. And then you're on deadline and everything's expected to be fast. And then you have to wait and wait and wait. And you don't know when it's going to end. Like I always say, if I could have gone back, 18 years ago and told myself, it will happen someday, you have to keep trying, it would have been like a huge relief just to know that it would happen. Because for so many years, I was just trying and thinking, this could never happen. Like I could maybe never have a book be published. So it's definitely hard. I don't know why I kept going. I think there was just this small part of me. First of all, I wanted it really badly, but also this very small part of me that obviously did believe in myself, or I wouldn't have kept going. But, and I would always get little boosts from people in the industry, like an agent saying, this isn't quite there, but you have something, or, going to a conference and pitching and someone saying like, I like this, just enough little crumbs that I was like, okay, I'm not crazy for thinking this could happen. So that helped a lot. That kept me going for sure. And also that I didn't have another career really. My husband was in the military and now he's in the foreign service. So we move a ton. So I was never going to have a traditional career. That just wasn't going to be possible for me as long as we were moving around the world. So I had even more like impetus for wanting it to work, because this really is the perfect job for our lifestyle now that it works. But for a long time, I wasn't getting paid to do it. So I did have other jobs, but nothing that was like a career I was passionate about. So, so the number of years that it took, I mean, I wrote Crown of Coral and Pearl in 16. Trying to think. I like have everything in my head about what country I was living in at the time. It was in Peru. So I think I started it at the end of 2015. And then, I didn't sell it until 2017 when we had just moved back to the United States. And then it didn't come out till 2019. So that was a long time.
Yeah. And then it's like a brand new book again too, I guess. It's like, so especially when you've had that long of a process, it's like rereading it again when it gets to that point. You're like, oh, that's excellent. Now, so you move around a lot. How does that go with your inspiration, your imagination? Does that help with your stories as well, being in these new places?
Yeah, it's huge for me. I think because I think it would be a lot harder for me to world build if the only world I knew was the one that I'd lived in my whole life.
Yeah.
So I definitely pick up little bits of inspiration from things I hear about the places I'm living or the folklore of wherever I am. And yeah, that definitely keeps my imagination going for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And with some advice to pass on to our writers right now who are going through that long rejection phase, maybe they've been writing for, close to 10 years, what would you pass on to those people?
I mean, the thing that I always told myself was just keep moving forward. If a book doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, or I have another idea, don't necessarily try to hold on to the thing that's not working, or, keep it in your back pocket, because you never know, you could end up selling that one down the road, like I did with, other books that I thought were also never going to sell. And then just to always, just keep swimming, just keep going. And and just, I say that there's like publishing is a combination of luck, talent, and persistence, and everybody's equation is different. And I think I have a little bit of talent, and obviously it always takes some amount of luck, but it was persistence for me that was like the largest part of that equation. And I was just going to keep doing it until someone finally like opened that door for me. And everyone I know who has been writing for a long time, who hasn't given up, has gotten there eventually. So hopefully it doesn't take you 10 years or 15 years to publish a book like it did me. But, if you want it, if you love it, then just keep going.
Yeah. If you love your process that much, how you can't give it up. Excellent. And so are you more of a world builder and a plotter, or a character driven person when you're thinking about, a new story?
I think most of my ideas are not the character. They're something plot related or something world related. And then my characters grow from that. For Luminous, the spark of inspiration was the tapestry. Before Leora's character came to be, she was sort of like my answer to a place where no light could get in. And with Crown, I knew I was going to write about twins. I knew that, the one who felt flawed would be the one who had the main journey. But Nor was sort of a response to the world that she lived in. And with the poison season, that's also how it came to be. The idea was the lake and then this forest that is kind of evil. Those things came to be before the main character, Leigh, came to be. So
I'm very excited for that one. That sounds incredible. Also, your covers are amazing. Like I have seen what's the new one called? Sorry,
the poison season.
The poison season, yeah. I did see the cover that you put up of that, and I'm just like, wow, it's great. And Luminous has a couple of different covers, I think, in each country. Does it change, or?
I mean, we sold Russian rights, so I don't know what that cover will look like. Usually it depends. So like Crown has some different covers in other countries, but like in Russia, they purchased, I think, the rights to the US edition cover.
Okay, cool.
So it just depends. But covers, like, I mean, obviously I love a pretty cover.
Yeah.
As an adult author, it matters a lot. Covers are really important, I feel like, and I've been very, very lucky. So
yeah, they're gorgeous. Fantasy covers are my favorite, I think. So on that, do you have any favorite books or any particular books that you read at the start of your journey that made you think, yep, that's what made me want to be a writer?
Well, I mean, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, Laini Taylor's books were definitely books that I loved and aspirational, not something I ever thought, oh, I can do that, but something that I was like, I want to live in those kinds of worlds as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then Shadow and Bone came out right before I moved to Russia. And I had already started plotting the book that got me an agent, but that didn't sell, which was set in Russia. So that was kind of before there was this huge influx of Russia books. And I decided I wanted to have lived in Russia before I started really writing it, because I didn't actually know anything about Russia before I lived there. So yeah, so that definitely like helped inspire me. I love Maggie Stiefvater's books. Mm-hmm. I love like the Scorpio Races, I feel like is the perfect standalone. And so with the Poison Season, that was kind of what I wanted, just because Luminous, there are threads that it could have a sequel, whereas I feel like the Poison Season is a true standalone. I love Margret Rogerson's books, like Sorcery of Thorns. I love fantasy writers where it's not like super complex world building, where it's very character driven and I feel like I can immerse myself quickly. I'm not constantly like, wait, where on the map am I? Or, you know, what word is this that I don't understand, or name I can't pronounce. Sort of accessible fantasy, I guess, is what I would say I like most. So yeah.
That's excellent. And is there anything else that you want to achieve in your career when it comes to writing? Do you have any other goals? Or I'm sure there's many more, and I'm sure you're already sitting on lots of books that are waiting to come out. But is there anything that you kind of got your eye set on specifically, or?
Yeah, well, I'd love to be in a major book subscription box and have some special editions. I think that would be amazing. I want to write another duology, and I have written the first book of what I hope will be another duology, although I haven't shown it to anybody yet, so I have no idea what will happen with that one. I would love to keep publishing a book a year, which will of course just depend on if I continue to sell that many books, but it's a good pace for me. I like it. I have a lot of ideas. That was the one good thing about writing for so long without selling anything, was that Crown was my 9th manuscript that I'd completed. So I knew that it wasn't like it was the first thing I'd ever written. I'd spent 5 years working on it, and then I was going to have to write something else under tight deadline. Like I had kept moving enough to know, like, I have more ideas. And I set deadlines for myself. Like I can meet these, demands. So that has really, even through the pandemic, I've been able to keep up my same schedule, even with homeschooling my kids and all those things. So that has given me the confidence that I hope I have the opportunity to keep publishing more books for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. And what does your current schedule look like, or even how has it changed from now to when you first started?
I think when I first started, I was actually more devoted because I wanted it so bad. And so like when my kids were really little, I would stay up late at night. I would cram all the writing I could into their nap times. I was kind of like driven in a way. I feel a little more relaxed now that I've actually published some books. So I don't feel like that panic that I kind of felt, or like I was racing against the clock all the time. Originally my goal was like, I'm going to be published by the time I'm 30. And then that came and went like 5 years. And so I don't feel that kind of pressure anymore. I don't feel like I have to work every single day. If I have a deadline, then I work every single day. But if I'm between deadlines and we're going on a family vacation, I try to like separate my work from that. I try not to work when my kids are home, because I try to spend that time with them. But of course, when they weren't in school because of Rona, I didn't have a choice. And that was challenging. This is the guest bedroom. And I was like, I had a desk upstairs, but it's in like a loft. There was no door. I was like, no, I need a door. Like I have to be able to separate myself from everybody. And it was hard, but yeah, I think I never got super precious about like my process, because I never had that opportunity. Like I had small kids and we were moving. And so it was like, you have to just make it work if you want this. And
yeah. So there's no specific things that you do to help you feel creative? The stories just kind of come to you? And
I feel like every time I finish one story, I'm always like, will I get another idea? Like, when's it gonna come? And then as soon as my brain is kind of freed up from the one thing that I'm working on, something always comes. And it usually comes from another book or a magazine article or a TV show or music, some other creative thing will kind of give me some little spot. I feel like you just have to be receptive to the ideas, and then they're definitely out there.
Yeah.
I don't ever go looking for them. They kind of find me, which is fortunate, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I certainly, like, it takes me a while to get in the flow state of drafting, especially. And if I had, you know, a perfect situation, I would probably go somewhere for 2 weeks and have no interruptions and just let it out. But yeah, it just hasn't worked out that way. I haven't gone on any kind of retreat or anything for 2 years since before the pandemic. So I try to have, 2 to 3 hour chunks of time, ideally. When I lived in Peru, I had a full-time maid/nanny helping me, which was huge. So I could write for like 6 hours straight, which I think is how I rewrote the book that had gone on submission and didn't sell. I wrote Crown, I wrote Luminous, all during this short span of time because I had that time. But now, I mean, I've drafted the most recent thing I wrote. It probably took me 4 months, and it was, I'm very like goal oriented. So if I say I'm going to write 5,000 words that day, I'm going to write 5,000 words that day.
Yep. So that's what you do. You give yourself that word limit or time limit, and it's like, yep, this is my time. This is what I'm getting done. Switch off from everything else, and that's that. Yeah, get lost in the story. And what is your favorite part of the process? Is it the drafting, or the initial idea and getting it out?
Yeah, I know a lot of people hate that part because they like the structure of revising and feeling like, okay, it's here now and I can fix it. But I like drafting because it's the one part of my life where there's no limits, there's no rules, especially with fantasy. I'm not worried necessarily about what anyone else is going to think. It's just me, and I can get in that flow state, which, where time just disappears and you don't even realize it's happening. That's like the best feeling. Yeah. So that's our favorite part.
Yeah, that's when you're in the most, you're in the most flow. So that's excellent. Is there any other books or anything that you would recommend for writers to read on the process of writing, or persistence, or anything that helped you get through?
Yeah, I mean, I've read the ones that, everybody talks about, like Bird by Bird and Stephen King's On Writing. And they're all great. I think the outline that I tend to use, I'm not a huge outliner, but I do like to have sort of a rough idea of where I'm going. The Blake Snyder's Save the Cat beat sheet is sort of what I use. You can find it online. You don't have to read the book. But no, I think a lot of people get bogged down in feeling like they have to have a process, or they see authors who have like 50 note cards all on a wall that they're moving around, and that's really intimidating. I don't write like that. I have maybe like a 10-point outline that I follow, and then I do let myself get kind of lost in the story and let it take me where it wants to go. And so far it hasn't let me down. There's always a point at like the 2/3 mark where I'm like, okay, I know where it's gonna, like what the climax is gonna be, but now I gotta get there. And I, at that point, maybe need to go back and outline a little bit more clearly so I know what I'm doing. But I like the surprises of not having a total set out plan where you like write something and you don't know what it's gonna mean, and then 100 pages later, you're like, oh, I planted that seed, which I didn't know I was doing. Like, that's such a great feeling. So I think people just need to just trust themselves a little bit and not feel like, oh, well, this person writes, 10,000 words a week, or this person, has to have, these 3 hours every morning that they use, or they have to have the right food, or they have to be in the right spot, or I have to do it, I have to have it completely planned out ahead of time. Like, just, it's not going to look, for what your process is not going to look like anybody else's process, and that's okay. And do what works for you. Whatever allows you to like get your butt in the chair the next day and feel excited about writing is your process,
100%. And I'm so glad that you said that. That is kind of the reason why I put this podcast together, because there is no one way of writing, and it's whatever works best for you. And throughout these interviews, you know, people are able to see that. And or even just if you try something that someone else has, like, oh, actually that's what works best for me, rather than like there's this one way. It's creativity, there will never be one way to it. So that's great. I'm so glad that you said that. Okay, so I have something very exciting at the end of this. So we're going to give away a copy of Luminous, which is your incredible book, and I cannot wait for more people to get their hands on this. And also your next book, which I'm very, very excited for. But so for someone to win Luminous, they have to answer a writing prompt from you. So what would be your writing prompt that people have to answer over the next week?
Okay, so in Luminous, the magic system, which I didn't really think of being unusual at the time, but people have pointed this out, that it's unusual that everybody has a different sort of ability who has magic. That just seemed very normal to me, but yeah. I guess. And so Leora sort of comes to learn that the most powerful magic is magic with a purpose. So your prompt can be yourself or whatever character you want has a power that's innate just to them, and how it might be exploited by someone with evil designs.
Oh, I love that. That is perfect to the book. And you said that, so this could there be a sequel to Luminous? Or am I? We'll have to wait and see.
I wrote it with the idea of there being a sequel in mind, but it sold as a standalone the same way that Crown of Pearl and Pearl did. So yeah. I never say never. I mean, there hasn't been, like, my publisher hasn't indicated anything, but I'm always open to going back to old worlds that I've created. So maybe someday.
Yeah, it's fun to revisit. That's excellent. Awesome. I can't thank you enough for coming on today, Mara. And I'm very, very excited to read some of the answers for that prompt as well. I will send you some of the ones that get chosen. So that's really great. Thank you. Is there any other points of advice or anything else that you want to leave the listeners with today?
No, just like I said, just keep going. If you love it, it will happen. You know, keep reading the things that inspire you. Keep your imagination open, your ears listening for those little things. Write them down, because they might not seem like anything at the time, but then some other little nugget will come along, and then you'll put them together, and then you have magic. So
absolutely. And where can listeners find you if they want to get in contact with you or read some of your books?
Through my website, I have a contact me link, or just on Instagram. That's where I'm at the most. And I always respond to DMs. So if anyone has anything, I'm here. I'm always awesome. Here.
Perfect. And I'll put all your links in the show notes. Thank you so much. And yes, I'm looking forward to this prompt. Thanks, Mara.
Bye. Thank you.